It's late September 2002. Helen Clark has recently been re-elected Prime Minister after shrugging off Corngate, remember when, to hand babyface Bill English National's worst ever election result. The number one song in the country is Avril Lavigne's Complicated.
So good.
So good. But film dominates our pop culture. We're a few months away from the orgy of half-cute, half-cringe nationalism that accompanied the Lord of the Rings Return of the King premiere, which is actually quite a good backdrop for us to remember when exec Dave Walden created the tribal Team New Zealand yachting fan engagement monster that got way out of hand. I'm talking about Blackheart.
What did you just say?
Yeah, see? This what is not like an excited what, it's a what are you talking about what, which is really buzzy to me because I remember this as being the only thing that happened that year, and yet you two are both completely oblivious to it, right? Anyway, kia ora koutou and welcome to Remember When. It's your weekly dose of pop culture nostalgia and Aotearoa, brought to you by The Real Pod. My name is Duncan Grieve and I'm joined today by two people who know, as I just said, they know almost nothing about this, I think, gripping episode in our nation's pop cultural history.
Not almost nothing. Absolutely nothing.
I've already forgotten what it's called.
It's Jane Yee and Alex Casey.
Best
Tell
woman,
us,
best
what-
woman on the job.
What is this that you've brought to us today?
It's really hard to know exactly how far back to go with this. I think you really need to start with the America's Cup. So we're going back about 150 years now to the Royal New York Yacht Squadron.
What a time. I remember it well.
Of course you do.
The number one song was.
A sea shanty. But no, so the America's Cup, I think is a really funny thing. Like, we're obsessed with it as a country, but basically no one else really knows it exists all that much. That's largely because for 130 years, the Royal New York Yacht Squadron raced for it and just never lost. So it was, which basically just sounds like it's a nice time for some really rich guys from New York to sort of pretend like they're having a competition that no one else will win. That changed in the early 80s when this rich, future disgraced Australian businessman called Alan Bond went to New York and funded a campaign that beat them and took it to Perth in Western Australia. And that basically sort of started this whole kind of, it just set the event into the imaginations of very rich men with sort of sea salt in their veins around the world. One of whom was, and I'm going to give him his full name because I only found it out during research and I love it, Sir Humphrey Michael Gerard Fay.
Oh.
Gerard Fay!
I know, right? So close.
What's the worst that I can say?
But so far. So Michael Fay he's a kind of controversial figure in New Zealand. He made huge amounts of money during the privatisation, deregulation frenzy of the 80s. And he basically created Team New Zealand. It was his money and his vision and his dream. And I think it's really important to know that when I'm, in terms of what I'm about to explain, because Team New Zealand is not like the All Blacks or the Silver Ferns. It's a team created from the kind of fervent imagination of a very rich man. It happens in the name of the Royal New Zealand Yacht Squadron, but it's not like a national team that's been around for decades. It's just a rich guy's plaything, effectively. It's got a little bit more complex since then, but that is the origin story of this, and I think it's important to remember. So, and I am getting to what Blackheart is, I swear. But basically, in 1995, first time out, Sir Peter Blake running the show and Sir Russell Coates, everyone's a knight in this story. They win the America's Cup. They bring it home. New Zealand goes crazy. Red Sox.
So is this...
The whole thing.
Was this when this happened? Was it the midnight? Because this is the only thing I have to hold on to here is the Red Sox.
This is not when it's happened. This is when it really begins. But it's important to understand. So the whole country goes crazy. 5 years on, they do it again. The America's Cup is still New Zealand's cup. And then immediately afterwards, Russell Coates and Brad Butterworth, who are the skipper and the tactician of the Team New Zealand boat, they have a little falling out.
They jump ship, don't they?
They jump ship. they literally jump ship to Ilingi, which is started by another billionaire, a frankly sexy 37-year-old Swiss-Italian billionaire called Ernesto Bertarelli. And so you got this amazing, it's actually like an awesome, someone should make a movie out of it. Like they go to Ilingi, this sort of new startup boat, and you have the Team New Zealand against the people who were formerly the kind of lead conspirators of Team New Zealand. And that is the kind of backdrop to this. So it's 2 years on, and you've got, like these kind of once, beloved teammates, now absolute rivals, facing off against one another. And that basically is the origin story of Blackheart. So,
what is Blackheart?
So what is Blackheart? Basically, there was this, it sounds like it was a boozy lunch that went too far, is how I would characterize it. Blackheart was the brainchild of this guy, Dave Walden, who, big ACT Party donor, MD of Saatchi & Saatchi Auckland, like a big time ad exec. And he had a lunch with Stu Wilson, like a former All Black captain, I think. Bill Ralston, then the editor of Metro, and a couple of other kind of... Oh, the other thing about Dave Walden, he's the creator of, or at least the sort of man behind, Goldstein, another Remember When.
Oh, now you're talking our language.
Right, I think basically Goldstein is going to feature in every single episode of Remember
Forrest
When.
Gump of New Zealand popular culture.
If you're only listening to this, by the way, and not watching our vidcast on YouTube, Alex and I are nodding our head heartily every time we hear a name we vaguely recognise. So when you drop in like whose name did you say before? And I was like,
Bill Ralston.
Bill Ralston.
That
Bill
level of
Ralston.
nod and recognition.
Yeah, we
from
were
us,
like,
and yet.
making us feel very, very part of this.
So like I realize that I'm going to be carrying the load on this one, and I have taken it on myself. The thing is, to kind of give a little bit of personal context, I was working as a postie at this time, 6 days a week, just riding around the mean streets of Remuera, delivering the mail. And this was back in the day when people in Remuera got a load of post. And so I was on my bike for hours and hours a day.
Presumably all just filled with cash.
Yeah, gold
It was,
bullion.
it was
Yeah.
very heavy.
Yeah.
And I was listening to Radio Sport the whole time, like 4, 5, 6 hours a day of, Devlin in the mornings, then Brendan Telfer for the balance of the morning, and then if it was a really late day, I'd get round to Graham Hill, who was honestly quite weird in the afternoons. And for this period, the only thing they talked about was Blackheart. Like, it was just the most convulsing event.
Have we said what Blackheart is yet?
Okay, so what's Blackheart? What's Blackheart? I should explain it.
There was a lunch.
There was a lunch, and basically these guys
Yum.
were just like so angry about this defection, and they didn't feel like they'd been adequately punished, or that New Zealand really understood that these were traitors. This was like an act of war.
Okay.
So they basically had a much bigger lunch with 100 people, invited guests, including your friend Susan Devoy.
My good friend.
Including our former Deputy Prime Minister, Sir Winston Peters. Told you everyone's a knight. Dame.
Yep.
Or Dame. And they basically raised $80,000 to launch an organisation called Blackheart, which was nominally supposed to be about making Team New Zealand feel really loved, making it feel like a fortress, a home stadium, America's Cup. This was September 2002. The America's Cup was in February the following year. So it was really trying to make those 6 months really matter. And so they raised $80,000, and because this was driven by ad execs, they started to put together an ad campaign, and it just got completely out of hand. Like, completely out of hand. Why are you guys laughing?
It just looked like 4 fingers to turn a page.
That's
I'm
Blackheart.
dehydrated.
That's Blackheart right there.
I'm still jet lagged. Okay, so they booked these billboards. Basically the slogan was "Country before money," which is ironic given how rich everyone involved in this story
So it was like a
is.
smear campaign as well. It was like a...
It was intended to not be, but it immediately became a smear campaign.
Was
Okay.
this a public campaign?
Yes.
So this is like that America's Cup equivalent of buy some red socks from Kmart. But this time it's country before money. It's very targeted.
Coots & Co., Swiss bankers since 2000. And high on a hill lived a lonely boatman, yodelay, 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 hoo.
Oh my God.
It's
That's so lame.
I
These
know.
are ad exec.
These
This
are
is
ad
like the
execs.
top.
This can't be your best copywriting.
I mean, Goldstein, though.
But basically the problem was that rather than focusing on supporting their team, it was about denigrating the opposition. And so this is the Blackheart web editor quoted in the New York Times. This is the crazy thing. This is not the kind of everyone reports the same web stories era. If you made the New York Times and the Guardian, which this story did, it was because this was a globally significant news story. Anyway, so the Blackheart web editor said, many people feel he, Russell Coates, committed treason. Like, they were just so hectic. And basically in the aftermath of it, of that launch, the language, they couldn't help themselves. It was all very this kind of florid nationalistic language, especially when it became clear that Alinghi were just a lot better at racing boats than Team New Zealand were. And basically people started, whether it wasn't the organisation itself, but there was this, this huge movement that got around them, and there were people like writing death threats to the sailors' families.
Oh my God.
They started wearing bulletproof vests. There were reports of snipers, like being seen. Like
What the hell?
the police investigations. They demanded that they got this 3,000 strong email database of the Blackheart fans. They thought amongst them would be these people making the threats, and basically I kind of feel for the guy David Walden, because he was like, this has got completely out of hand. But by then he couldn't really control it. He's like, we're not a dastardly organisation. Great word. We aren't a bunch of nutters. But then the Blackheart web editor was like, I wouldn't even talk to the bloody traitor unless he were asking for a ride to the airport. Like, it was just so intense.
But is this happening alongside get your red socks and have a nice time? Or is this the same era?
No, so
No.
the get your red socks and have a nice time was 95.
I see.
That was the nice time yachting when we won. I think we won 5-0 both times. We're just real good at boat racing. Then, Better really comes in, takes these sailors, and you can kind of, and it's poor old young Dean Barker has to take over, and we're just not as good, basically.
I have a question. What happened to the Whitbread round the world yacht race? Why is that not a thing anymore? Is it?
I think it's still a thing. I think it might be called the Volvo Around the World Yacht Race.
Do we talk about it?
Not as much.
It was a big deal at the time, though. Remember?
Yeah, we still do it, but
that
it's
was
just not as famous.
side
yeah.
question. Sorry.
No, it's very fair. It's very fair.
So the main campaign in New Zealand was this like deeply negative horror show. Even the name.
Were there socks?
Blackheart.
Blackheart.
Were there any? What was the merch? Were there socks? Were there?
No, I think that. Look, again, a lot of this is memory. It's sort of early internet, so researching it's a bit tough. But I think that it had a few months where it was very present, and there were like full-page newspaper ads, and this was like a front-page story. It seemed to divide the country into like 10% of people who are like, we should make them walk the plank, versus 90% of people who are like, oh, you guys are going a bit too hard. But it really made the 10% dig in. Like, Murray Deaker, who was this sort of voice of God sports broadcaster at the height of his powers, he was one of the most vociferous supporters of Blackheart. And so people would call up and, it was just like hours and hours of, God damn these traitors. And it was like, oh, hell yeah,
Well, that's the thing. It's like, what's the goal? Like, when would they feel satisfied that the campaign had done something? If not, like, driving people to more and more intense, like,
I think that's the
reactions.
problem, is that it was... I think it's a classic case of a sort of an advertising campaign that doesn't really think about that, and that they were like, we want this to be supporting of Team New Zealand, but they kind of got excited, wrote this copy, and it really kind of went strange. But by then they were kind of backed into a corner and they couldn't shut it down because it was a bit grassrootsy and it was just very, very strange. And like New Zealand at the time, obviously aside from Return of the King, it wasn't like now where it feels like we're quite regularly covered in international newspapers and so on. It was pre-social media. For us to make the New York Times or the Guardian was a big deal. And the fact that we were making it for basically painting people who moved from one sports organisation to the other, which is just the most normal thing in the world in sports, as traitors who should be run out of the country, if not assassinated, was quite a big and, honestly, with hindsight, shameful deal.
Did we win?
No, we got a clock clean, 5-0.
A what now?
Yeah, we got absolutely pants.
A cock clean. What now?
Our clock cleaned.
Clock clean.
We got
clock clean.
we got
Gotta
our
be-
clock cleaned.
Gotta be careful with that one.
Yeah, you do. I might well have not been careful enough back there, but who's to say?
Well, Blackheart did not make it to South Wairarapa, to Greytown Primary School when I was 12, so it didn't. At least it didn't reach the children.
It didn't
Which is
also
good.
make it to the 2002 in New Zealand Wikipedia page of big events, but not much did, I have to say. 2002 was kind of like a black hole of a Blackheart of a year.
It's quite weird, those 2002, like the year in New Zealand wikis. There's often like a lot of stuff about contemporary dance.
There's so much about dance. It's absolutely bonkers. And they've got the full list of like New Zealand Music Awards finalists and winners.
It's really
We got to get in there. Can we start filling it with Remember When? Like the Mike Chicken? Oh my God.
wow.
Why did
Mike
we
Putter
never?
McChicken?
Why did we never call it Mike Chicken?
Mike Chicken. Wow.
It's so good. Anyway, it does feel like this kind of throwback to a much more insular New Zealand when we were a lot more kind of nationalistic, and the America's Cup was just life or death for us. And I think it's kind of, I think it kind of illustrates what a stupid idea it was. The fact that, we had an America's Cup here in lockdown, and the Team New Zealand, the same organisation, is now just going to have the next one in Barcelona because I can get more money for it. So Team New Zealand, I think that's way less patriotic if you want to go down that track, to just be like, oh, we're just going to take it to Spain.
That is literally money over country.
Yeah.
There might be a big lunch happening right now that we don't know about.
Well, that's true. Maybe we need to get Blackheart back for that. So yeah, just a wild episode, and people were so consumed by it. I just remember, because I listened to so much talkback at the time, the fact of this whole country boiling with rage over this, what was basically like, a set of very rich people being kind of moving from one much richer person's team to another person's. It was just like, just because it's called Team New Zealand, like it wasn't a government endorsed or like a national sports body. It was just wild.
And
But,
to get into sailing at all, right? It's not like people get plucked out of regional towns like rugby or whatever, right? It's like you have to be born into a certain place as it is.
absolutely.
You need to be living in one of the seaside suburbs, where there's a
Totally.
lovely yacht club, and you get out there on your little Optimist when you're about 6 or 7 and have a hoon, and that's money.
Absolutely right. So so that was Blackheart. What a time.
Oh, I reckon I'm going to forget that. In days.
A real journey. The name's going to stick with me.
It is, yeah. It was a great name.
It's a bad feeling.
It's a really bad
It's
feeling.
because I'm thinking of Black Hands.
Yeah, that's not a good feeling either.
That was probably around the same time. Remember when? Oh, no.
No.
I already did a podcast about that.
Okay, all right. Well, let's wrap this up. Don't forget that we have our bonus episode of The Real Pod currently recapping Traitors on, what is it? TV3 Now Discovery?
Just three.
Just 3. On 3.
TV3 Now Discover. I'll just say as many of the words as I can, and surely one of them's right.
None of them were right, actually. None of them were right. But yes, that's where it is. But you can go to our Substack, which is therealpod.substack.com. Sign up to be a subscriber, and then if you are a paid subscriber, you'll get that extra episode every week This one's free to all, though, because it's very important that we remember when these things, you know.
And you've got to sign off. What's the
You've got to do the
tagline?
sign
You
off.
could do a new one if you want.
Anyway, thank you for joining us for Remember When. Join us next week as we unearth another gem from our rich pop culture history.
Thanks, iHear, for recording.
Thank you, I hear.
Thanks for remembering with us.
Is that it?
No. Yeah, it is. It really is.
Thanks for remembering when. Is it?
That's just-
Oh, we're working on it.
We're working on it.
From the Spinoff Podcast Network, you've been listening to The Real Pod, hosted by me, Jane Yee, along with Alex Casey and, most of the time, Duncan Grieve. Our producers are T.I. Butler and Samuel Robinson. Thanks for listening.